Content advisory. Some of these stories contain graphic imagery and violence. Listener's discretion advised. So, there's a bunch of good stories in one Russian creepypasta archive based on the tales told by Annen's grandpa, who worked as a police inspector in the Soviet Union in the 90s in Russia. Those stories are basically posts made by that Annen on one of the Russian image boards many years ago. To my knowledge, there is no English translation of these stories, even though they are pretty good and are all based on actual police cases Annen's grandfather worked on. Since I speak Russian, would some of the Annens here like me to translate them? I'm asking because there's a shitload of text and I wouldn't want to do all this work if no one is interested in this stuff. These days, I don't even know what X is about anymore. So, gentlemen, I've managed to find a cable for my cheap photo camera, and that means that this is the time for exciting tales. As I said, my late grandfather served in the militia in the Soviet Union until the very end of the 90s. Translator's note, the name for the police forces in the Soviet Union and many Warsaw Pact countries. To be more precise, he was an inspector in the Sol Militia station in a small town near Moscow. He was a very tight-lipped, solemn man, but when you asked him about his work, he usually became more talkative. In my opinion, work was the only thing he loved in his life. So, when I was younger, I was interested in paranormal stuff even back then. I spent a lot of evenings in his kitchen, inquiring about the most interesting cases of his career. After my grandfather died, I found a thick notebook that he apparently used as a diary of sorts that he kept in his personal cabinet. In that diary, there was a collection of his most, let's say, curious cases. I've managed to get this diary from my grandma a few times, and reading it, I was always thinking about my grandpa as some sort of mathematician. No literature style, no personal opinions, only confirmed cold facts, such as places where a corpse was found, a criminologist's evaluation, suspects, and stuff like that. A few theories and a couple of notes. I think he kept working on these cases in his free time, trying to solve these riddles. Most of his notes correlates with the stories he told me when I was a child, but there were also a few that I'd never heard about. In case you suddenly enjoy some of these stories, I might even pay a visit to my grandma and ask her to let me flip through a few pages of that diary, read up on some cases I'm not familiar with, and take a few photos of the former scenes of crimes. Later, we can try to guess what happened there. As I have said, I wanted to write some sort of book about those cases, so I'll provide you with some photos that I already got with some additional notes, but don't expect all of my photos to be of exact crime scenes for obvious reasons. In some cases, I was too chicken to enter particular houses because neighborhoods here, as the town in general, are full of certain criminal elements, and if you enter some shitty hostel full of ex-cons and drug addicts, you might simply never leave it. Also, some places got intercoms these days. I will also add that there will be no popobawas, no colorful descriptions of monsters and stuff like that. Translator's note. Popobawa is an evil spirit from Zanzibar that is also a bit of a meme on Russian X because this name sounds funny in Russian, something like ass joker. Many cases have serious mystical undertones, but with some imagination you can probably explain them with the framework of habitual phenomena. But I can promise you a bit of noir, dismemberment, and romantic piss-stained staircases in apartment complexes. Oh, yes, I would also ask you to not get all booty blasted about the quality of my photos. I am no photographer, and instead of a proper camera, I got this digital piece of shit. Well, let's start. First case I want to tell you about happened in '93, and it is particularly interesting because no one managed to explain what happened here. I will add a few photos to this post. First has an apartment complex where it happened. Second, an exact place where a body was found. Second, stairwell between the 3rd and 4th floors if you absolutely must know. So, around 10 o'clock in the evening, an investigatory operative group, in this small town it consisted of just random regular cops, but usually had an investigator, translator's note, Soviet/Russian analog of a detective rank, and an expert criminologist, was called in on a report about a discovery of a corpse. And this is what they saw on that staircase. A human body leaking a shitload of blood, head separated from the torso and lying not far away, lacerations that look as if someone had chewed him, according to my grandpa, his clothes that consisted of training pants, sweater, and slippers, torn in a dozen places, all some smaller injuries on his naked skin. It was instantly obvious that this corpse was fresh, which was confirmed by the criminologist on the scene. Rigor mortis hasn't set in yet, which indicated that less than 2 hours passed since the moment of death. This was confirmed later, during the interrogation of the victim's inconsolable widow, who lived on the 4th floor, whose door was just like 3 meters away from the body. By the way, she was the one who actually found him and reported the corpse. The widow was clearly an alcoholic, and already had some time to get wasted, but nonetheless she did provide some information. Her husband left the flat around 9:30 in the evening to take out some garbage. When 15 minutes passed, she started to worry and then decided to stop and chat with his drinking buddies, who usually sat near the entrance of the apartment complex, drinking. Windows of their flat provided no overview of the yard outside, if I recall correctly, so she decided to go downstairs herself to look for him. But the moment she left her flat, she saw the disfigured body of her husband in a pool of blood. She failed to provide any more details during the later questionings. Now for the interesting part. Interrogations of other inhabitants of that complex provided literally no additional information. Not a single one of them heard any ruckus, screams, or sounds of fighting, nothing. And that is considering the shitty non-soundproof doors that people had back then. There was also indeed a bunch of drunkards sitting on the porch downstairs. According to them, they were hanging out there since around 8 in the evening, and in all that time only some old lady who lived on the first floor and a single mother who lived on the second entered the complex. Both of them also heard and saw nothing. During that time, not a single person left the complex. By the by, my grandfather almost instantly suspected some sort of large dog. What else could dismember a person in such a manner in the middle of civilization? Later investigation revealed that there were 2 dog owners in that complex, but their dogs were not nearly big enough to inflict such wounds, which was also later confirmed by the coroner. Head was indeed separated from the body as if with the teeth of some large animal. His spine was literally ground in places. Also, one of his legs had very clear markings of jaws. According to the coroner, it looked very deliberate, as if left there intentionally. Every single tooth of both lower and upper jaw left a clean mark, which almost never happens in a normal coroner's practice. That one sure has never seen such a thing. Jaws indeed were similar to a dog's, but a really big one, and there were 48 of those teeth marks, while normal dogs only have 42, sometimes a bit more, sometimes a bit less, but rarely and not by much. Now a couple of my own comments. A large dog is indeed capable of separating a grown man's head from his body in 15 to 20 minutes. I can confirm this as an owner of a large dog. No, my dog didn't kill anyone, but they can chew through a large bone in around 10 minutes. But there would be a fuckload of noise and shouts. Okay, if the dog somehow managed to rip the guy's vocal cords in the first bite, there wouldn't be that many shouts, which I guess is possible, considering the size of those jaws. But how could no one notice a huge ownerless dog entering and exiting the apartment complex? Such animals tend to be remembered. Another strange thing is that blood was only found near the body. There was no blood on the stairs themselves, neither above nor below, as if he was first put on the floor and then got his head calmly chewed off in silence. My dog attacked a homeless dog once, and there was a lot of blood. It was fucking dripping from its jaws and chest all the way home, and let me remind you that a human has much more blood than a dog. Nothing like that here. Everything is crispy clean. So we have something big that appeared on the staircase between the floors. That house had no garbage chute if you would like to entertain such a wild theory of its method of movement. Silently chewed a grown man's head off, left a dozen injuries on its body without any signs of resistance, and then disappeared. So it goes. Officially, the case was explained by a wild dog attack and then closed the fuck down. Not before informing all the local dog catchers that they should do their work better in the future. This story also happened around 93 in that same small town near Moscow. I tried and failed to Google anything about it, and I never heard anyone discussing it here in this town, so I guess there's no reason to give away the name, to be quite honest. My gramps worked in a local militia, and I asked him about the case many times, so I guess I didn't completely imagine it, even though I was like 4 years old back then and my memories are a bit foggy. Back then, young women started to disappear in our town. Absolutely normal girls, not some criminal's girlfriends or anything, according to my grandpa. In a single month, 6 of them disappeared. And then the 7th was lost. Her father was a trainer in a local boxing club, popular with both sportsmen and the local thugs. From a whole bunch of his clients and friends who were willing to help him, he created some sort of militia patrol, aimed at looking for his daughter and preventing similar abductions in the future. This militia started to stroll around the neighborhood in small groups, and one night I woke up from some loud noises from outside. I ran to my window and saw my mother and father standing there, looking at a bunch of guys who were trying to widen some tiny cellar window that was right under mine, first floor, with sledgehammers. Now, for some facts from my gramps. Guys from one of those patrols saw 3 guys carrying something big towards that cellar. They immediately ran after them, but those 3 guys had managed to close the heavy steel cellar door before they were caught. Later I learned that they also built a barricade from some garbage laying inside when they realized the guys from the militia are not joking. So, the militia guys called all the others and they broke into the basement through that window, where they found the 3 crazy fuckos armed with knives and the girl's already dismembered body. I know now that there was also a handwritten book in an unknown language. It was later apparently lost or stolen right from the evidence box. A hacksaw for metal, and a dog's skull. Walls and floor was covered in some symbols written in chalk, which were mostly destroyed under the feet of 24 boxers who entered the basement, but nothing of value was lost, I guess. By the time the cops arrived, those 3 guys were already heavily beaten by the boxers. 2 of them got crippled for life, and 1 actually died. Few boxers received some superficial cuts. Interrogation by the raging father gave no results, same as the latter for interrogations by the militia. Many traces of blood were found in that basement, though, from different people from a long period of time. As you can expect, no bodies were found, even though search parties come through every neighborhood in the nearby forest. The 2 survivors kept their silence. Come to think of it, those guys were some sort of fucked up in the head neat necromancy cosplayers or something, and even they managed to hide those bodies very well. Imagine what a smarter person with no mental issues could do. I just stumbled upon those photos, so I guess I'll tell you about them. I have to warn you that some people might not find it too scary, but this case has always captivated me. There is just something about it. Also, when I once saw some tiny lights in those woods at night, I figuratively shat my pants. It will be longer than the first one, but do prepare yourselves, for I have no fucking idea how long the third one will be either. It happened in the winter of '95. One evening, around 8 o'clock, a strange visitor came to visit the local militia station, a priest of the local church, which, by the way, happens to be in the middle of fucking nowhere. He came to report threats they had been receiving for some time now. Priest brought a bunch of notes with him, which were written on torn notebook pages in crooked block letters. They were written with a bunch of mistakes. That desk cop on duty that night had a field day with. But he didn't laugh for long. According to the priest, he regularly received those notes in his mailbox, first every 3 days, later every day, which was the reason he decided to finally report them. After being asked if he wanted to add something else to his report, he hesitantly added that recently he started to hear the sounds of slaps in his apartment, as if someone was slapping linoleum in his corridor and kitchen with bare hands, very distinctly. When he asked if he actually checked what it was, he answered that he was too scared to leave his room and just prayed to God, hoping for his protection. He was clearly worried that people would just think he's just insane, and people at the station indeed thought so, but his report was officially accepted nonetheless. It was a busy period for the militia, and since Priest didn't look well in the head, the case and those notes were forgotten for a time. Around a week later, an investigatory operative group gets a call. In the forest, around 200 to 250 meters deep, on the glade you can see in the first photo, a body was found. And not just some body, but, as you probably have guessed, the body of that very priest. State of that corpse was pretty fucking terrible. Almost all of the muscle tissue on his hands and legs were missing, body was covered with livor mortis and blemishes, facial features were distorted by the rot. He was only recognized so quickly thanks to his cross, which was the only element of his clothes on him, long hair and beard. Later it was concluded that he died 7 to 8 days before the discovery. Additionally, his body was clearly kept indoors for some time, since it wouldn't have rotten so much in the winter frost. It was confirmed by the elderly guy who found the body, since he used to walk with his dog every day on the same route in this forest and only discovered the body that morning. Also, which was especially bizarre, many prints that were found around the body looked like the prints of human hands. They didn't look like handprints, they were the handprints. It was just fucking ridiculous at that point, quoting my grandfather. There was a trail of such prints leading around the forest, strangely enough, not on the cleared trail, but around it, in the snowdrifts. There was no evidence of a body being dragged, all the other prints belonged to the elderly guy and cops. Previous night there was a serious snowfall, which would have covered the tracks, so body clearly wasn't there for long and it clearly didn't happen to appear there by itself. Questionings of the elderly guy, residents of the nearby houses, and guards of a garage cooperative close by didn't clarify much. Though the elderly guy kept nagging about finding corpses of animals on that glade, dogs, cats, rats, crows, and such, he reported to the militia many times, but nothing was done about it and he had to bury the animals himself. He also just had to share his theory about Satanists with the investigators. The place itself was far away from anything. The closest houses were like 600 to 700 meters away, same as the garage cooperative. No cars stopped nearby, no mysterious people were seen there, not even ordinary people with a big bag or parcel. Literally fuck all, and that's when somebody remembered about the notes. Earlier notes were rather simplistic, basically threats like, reject your faith or we will kill you. But those that came later were a bit more interesting. Take off your cross or you will feed the hungry one with yourself. My grandfather quoted from his memory. There was more, but he didn't recall what those were about, sadly. All of them had a bunch of mistakes, as I already stated. No handwriting expertise was done, to my knowledge, but those notes were quickly given away to experts in order to check for fingerprints while investigators decided to visit the priest's flat. Door wasn't closed, though there were no signs of forced entry. Remembering the priest's words about slaps on the floor, linoleum in his corridor and kitchen was checked, without much hope, for fingerprints. But it was a sudden success. A few clear fingerprints. Huge fingers certainly were not the priest's. Fingers looked like they belonged to some hammerer or smith, according to my grandfather. Other than that, everything in the flat looked in order. All obvious valuables, like the icons, were still there. But there was no way to know for sure, since the priest lived alone and had no relatives, being an orphan. In short, fingerprints on the notes were identical to those on the floor. But neither the local militia station nor the bigger regional archive had those prints in their databases. Meanwhile, coroner reports stated that the muscles in his hands and legs weren't eaten by the animals, but neatly removed with surgical accuracy, using either a scalpel or a small and very sharp knife. No additional wounds were found on his body, no traces of known poisons were found either. Militia had to start questioning members of the priest's church parish. He wasn't seen there since the day he reported the death threats to the local station. Obvious conclusion was that he disappeared after visiting it, since it happened after the evening service. So it happened either on his way home or in his flat, considering it was found open. Questioning his neighbors revealed that he probably didn't come home that day. One old lady came to his door at around 9 in the evening to ask for some life advice, but no one opened. She didn't hear any suspicious sounds or seen anyone suspicious either. It seemed to be a complete dead end. All the local invalids were checked, just in case. Investigators really tried to somehow work the strange handprint angle. At first, they started to check those who lived nearby, and after Chechnya and Afghanistan, there were many. By the end of it, the militia had checked almost all the town's invalids, but found no fingerprint matches. They didn't really expect any results at that point, to be honest, so they just wrote it off as probable local cultists, which was really easy to do back then because of the story that happened when I was a child. Even those 2 guys who were caught years ago were questioned, but to no avail. Maybe it was their friends doing something, but I doubt it, since modus operandi seems too different. Of course, if the priest wasn't largely ignored when he came to the station, he probably could have told them something else, and that info might have resulted in a solved case. But we have what we have. And it really smells of some mysticism, in my opinion. By the way, here's another photo of that place made at around 11 in the evening. Those are the little lights that I told you about in the beginning. Zooming didn't result in anything, and the flash on my camera was so fucking bright that I got scared and decided to leave that place in case I was seen. Not that I'm a coward, but the forest becomes really creepy when you know this story. The lights are around the place where the grave is. Those are certainly not cigarette lights, too far away to be seen clearly. Possibly small fires of motorcycle lights. There's no way to get a car there. It remains a mystery. Hello everyone, I just want to say thank you for listening. Make sure to like the video if you enjoyed this story, and remember to subscribe if you want to hear more in the future. Click the bell icon in order to be alerted when I have more stories to tell, and until then, don't ignore the crazy priest.